Welcome back, everyone. It is 2022 now,
Woo.
but guess what?
Wild.
We're going to be talking about our top 10 games of 2021. Now, you may be wondering, why hasn't this video dropped yet? Well, we wanted to take our time, get a lot of these games played. There was a few games that I kind of played right at the end of the year because I wanted to make sure whether or not they were on my list. Not to mention the fact a variety of us have been dealing with various sicknesses throughout the holidays in December and January.
Yep, I mean, it's
and
the time.
We're finally now all pretty healthy at this
It's
moment. So this is the first time also that we've all been able to get together post-holidays.
Yeah.
Jeremy's down here.
It kind of worked out for timing, so it kind of worked out.
Exactly. So this is our top 10 for 2021. We each have 10. That's 40 games in all. So it's going to take a while, but we're going to try
overlap.
to... There will be some overlap, spoiler
We'll
alert. But we're going to start with number 10. And as we start, if you want to explain, and we're going to start with Emily and come down this way. But if we each want to explain kind of how we approached our top 10, we do this every year, but it's just a good reminder for everyone out there.
Yeah, so I'll start us off with number 10. Before I get to it, I do want to do with my approach a little bit. So when I was thinking about this, there were a lot of good games this year that I played, but I was really thinking about if you had these games in front of you and said, Emily, we can play one game right now, which one would I choose, right? And then I kind of use that to kind of stack rank them and say, well, this against that, which can be hard when you're doing different types and genres. But that was my philosophy going into it. So that being said, my number 10 was Messina 1347.
Nice.
Yeah, I really like this one. I'm a big fan of Heavy Euros. It did a lot of great things with the gameplay, a lot of like crunchy getting to do this and that and working together. So it did make my list this year.
It almost made my list.
Almost. It also very, very, very almost made my list. In fact, it's almost like 10.5 for me, maybe. Messina's a really good game. We've talked about it a fair amount on the channel. And it is one of those games, too, that's not like widely available, but it was available last year. We had our hands on it, and it's a crunchy little game for sure.
Yeah, I think the only reason it didn't make my list, the only reason is because of the complexity level. I don't feel like I could just recommend it. You almost really need to have played it with somebody that's played it.
And paid attention.
And paid really close attention, and then bring that level of attention to your teach as well. So I would say that, like, you learn it for the rulebook, fine, but if you can play it with somebody that's already played it, that's just going to be so much better.
We played it on the live stream. I would definitely take a look at that first and then do your playthrough, and you'll enjoy it much better.
Yeah. That's a good point. Good idea. Nice plug.
That was a good plug.
Ryan?
All right, so first of all, a couple things that we didn't say already. Number one, of course, like these are games that I think were all released in 2021. So
in some way, shape, or form.
I didn't put anything on my list that's like, oh, I got a sneak peek at a game and I played it and I really liked it.
No.
Sure, some of that stuff I loved and we'll talk about it in other venues, but this is not the venue for that, for me at least. I also didn't put any expansions on here. 2021 had amazing expansions, and I had my list was like 5 expansions were on my list. So you'll actually see me do a video that's just my top 5 expansions of 2021. So I'm saving that for separately.
You know what I'd love right now is if you said my number 10 is an expansion that's not technically coming out until 2023.
It adds enough to the gameplay for I need to speak about it right now.
So,
Brian.
All right, so my number 10 is Origins First Builders.
Nice.
This is a game that I thought earlier this year, or when it was on my most anticipated list, I thought it was going to be a lot higher on my top 10 list. Because of just it has all these different themes that I really like. The dice placement, the dice drafting, your powers get stronger as you move through the game, and you really build to something. However, I do think it falters a little bit in the end game. I don't think it ends strong, and I think that kind of pushed it a little bit lower on my list. But it's definitely a game that's worth playing, and I think I'll always have fun with it. But I am going to be doing another shout out here. On our Kickstarter, we actually had like a promo pack for some alternate end conditions. And I think I will always play the game with those alternate end conditions because I think it does make the game better. And if I had played more with that, it might actually be higher on my list as well.
Yeah, that game is also nearly on. It's probably also 10.5 for me in terms of making my list. It was a game, and this is an interesting thing. Throughout the year, tell me if you guys agree, you play games, and as they release and as we get to touch them, I'm like, okay, this is probably going to be on my top 10. But what happened this year, and why that's not on my list, spoiler alert, is because so many more games kept coming out late in the year, whether they were all pushed. And then we had this giant glut late in the year of all these games hitting, and a lot of them were fantastic.
Right.
So
Yeah, this is it's always going to be an Essen thing. And that goes back to even how our lists are created. We are fortunate in having access to these games. Sometimes these games are, especially with the shipping crisis, like some of these games are actually supposed to release in September, October.
Or even earlier.
Right, or even earlier. And we had access to them. We played them. I mean, you see videos for some of this stuff at Gen Con that we had. Bitoku just became available.
Yeah.
So it's like, for some people, they're like, I couldn't even buy this game.
Yeah.
Well, or if you didn't go to Essen, you didn't get this game. Or if you didn't, like I import games all the time. If you didn't import it like I did, you didn't have access to this game. So there's going to be a little bit of that as well. I just so you know that. For me, I'll just tell you that First Origins has a decent solo mode, but the one that you can get that's an actual downloaded one, makes it really good.
Oh.
So
I haven't tried that.
yeah,
I need to try
but
that.
the other one is like a trading mode. But yeah, if you get the one offline, you print it. It's very good. It's very involved too.
Oh, good. Now, before I say my number 10, and speaking of games that came out at Origin, or it came out at Gen Con that is just now hitting, my number 10 is Butoku.
Yeah, you bought
Oh, okay.
Ah, I
Well,
like
look at
Bitoku.
that.
And like Emily, I kind of approached it that way. But one other thing in terms of my top 10 list and how I approach it is I try to round it out with a variety of games. I've always done this. We all have our wheelhouses. So we all like medium weight Euros, for instance, or a lot of us do. But when I make my top 10, I want to take into consideration a lot of other things. There's some party games that come out that are really good.
Yeah.
And things that I think will stand the test of time that I think deserve sort of the position on my top 10. Not to mention, I played them with my family, which is not exactly the group that I always play with, but they're also not going to play maybe Bitoku.
Sure.
Right.
But anyway, my number 10 is Bitoku. This one, like we just said, just is now kind of coming out, but we've had access to it since Gen Con, and it is point salad.
It's a beautiful game, too.
It is also, it is gorgeous.
gorgeous.
It's got this beautiful fantasy theme that just appeals to me. Could the theme be completely something else? Probably. Sure. They could have. But it is an absolute beautiful board. And like we've said on some of our content, it's one of these boards that you either look at and go, ho, 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 or no. But I'm of the oh, ho, ho version. So I really like Bitoku. That is my number 10.
Okay. For my list, you have already seen my top 10 solo list, so I'm just going to keep all those titles off except for one of them. So I just decided, hey, there's even one that I forgot to put on my top 10 that was clearly a top 10 one, and I'm putting it on this list because I was like, I literally recorded it. You know how you make a top 10 and you're just like, oh my God, I cannot believe it. It's right there on your shelf, and you're looking at it, you're like, how did I not put that on my top 10? So I'm going to start off with a game that like hit me pretty hard, and I played it constantly for about 2 weeks straight, and that was Hadrian's Wall by Renegade and Garfield Games. And this one, it just speaks to the type of games that I like. That one's like just that quick trigger, pleasing turns all the time. And there's a constant like feedback of things. And I also like that it's balanced by, okay, so what you are doing now, there's going to be this thing that comes at the end of every round you need to prepare for.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's like, meanwhile, while you're triggering all these combos, having a happy good time, you got something that can really mess things up. And I just like the choices. The solo mode is great in that game. You can there's even a campaign that you can download for that one. So it's just kind of a gift that keeps on giving. I hope they expand it, but I don't want another pad.
That would be a challenging thing to expand.
3 pads.
Have 3 pad expansions. So, whatever. I'll be happy if they do it in a big box and put multiple pads in there and make it your 3rd pad. I'm fine with that. But that game is it's a very pleasing game. Can be a little chaotic as far as keeping track of people's turns and stuff like that. But you're either in or out on that type of stuff, those type of games, roll and write type games. It's right up there with the Fleet, the dice game, and one of my favorites, Roam and Roll. These games that have all these interesting turns.
It's like really a complex Euro, but it's also a roll and write. It is or is not on somewhere on my list.
Yeah.
It just missed mine.
Oh.
But my number 9 was Red Rising, and this is the board game that was using the IP from the book series by Pierce Brown. Ryan was the one who was like, I'm reading this book series, you should read it too, and we knew the game was coming out, and I was like, okay, I'll read it too. I was like hit or miss on the books a little bit. Some of the parts I really liked, and some of the parts I really, really disliked. So we've had longer book discussions.
We have actually. We've had quite a bit of book discussions.
But the game is great, and I really enjoyed playing the game, especially after reading the books, because you got to see those characters come to life.
Yeah,
they did a great job with the graphic design, and it was just, you got to see all the colors. So it's based around a society where there's a faction of colors, right? I think it's 7 to 9. I don't remember how many. But it's really cool because you get all these characters that are like violet or silver or gold, and you get to see them come to life on these character cards. Plus, the mechanics are based on Fantasy Realm. It's basically Fantasy Realm with a board, and that makes it sound like it's just a reprint of the same game, but it's not. It really feels very different because you have this like board element and you have different tracks you're going up. It feels... I would still want to own both Red Rising and Fantasy Realms and bring them out at different times, but they're both widely accessible. So I own Red Rising, and now I've gotten it to the table multiple times, which to me is a big success, and why it made the top 10 list.
I liked it quite a bit too. I have something to say about Red Rising.
Getting it to the table a lot is another variable, I think.
Yeah.
If it hits your table, it's probably a top 10 game for you.
As a group of people like us that cover a lot of games, or get our hands on a lot of these games, to have a game played multiple times or just a lot, it says a lot about.
You can't deny that.
You can't deny that, and I think hopefully our top 10s communicate that to you. It's like, it's not just a game where we're like, ooh, that was impressive.
I played it once and it was fun.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I actually do have one game. But it was
so
that
forget
impressive.
everything we just said.
No, but I'm just saying, like, it does speak to the game. But
Yeah.
I'm going to use that one example. Just, I think it made that much of an impact on me.
Yeah.
That's a great segue to my number 9, because my number 9 is Golem, which is a game that I played 8 times last year.
Wow, you played it 8 times?
I did, because it was a game where a lot
Does that
of
include the digital times?
that does include the one digital
okay.
time.
One
We played it
digital.
one time on Tabletop Simulator together. Golem is just a game that, like, I thought I was going to really like it because it's Luciani. And then I played it and I was like, okay, yes, it's good, but I like Grand Austria Hotel better.
Okay.
But more people kept saying, like, oh, they wanted to learn it.
Yeah.
And so I was just going to teach it, but then I was like, okay, I'll sit and play. And that's how I ended up playing it 8 times. And, over the course of those games, like, you really start to see the intricacies of how Golem is just so much different than Grand Austria, because at the, your first play, you're just making those comparisons. But then when you separate it out and you can start to look at Golem as its own thing, you see, like, okay, yeah, there's some similar elements, but the way you have to approach the game and the things you're doing in that game are so different. And there's, like, these 3 lanes you can go down. And ultimately, I think that's what's so satisfying to me about the game is, like, you can cap out one of those lanes, maybe you can cap out 2, but you're not capping out all 3. So it's just a competition between other players, like, which lanes are you going down? Who's going after which cards that help them go down one of those specific 3 lanes, right?
And you don't even mean literally the lanes on the board.
Well, they are the 3 lanes on the board.
But it's also how that relates to the scoring lanes.
Correct. Each one of those 3 lanes on the board corresponds to a different section of your player board, and each one is like a gameplay lane as well that requires different resources and does different things. I could talk about this game for a while, and we did. We actually have a first impressions video that will speak more about why I enjoyed it. Again, Grand Austria Hotel is one of the classic games of all time.
Yeah.
And, you can't compare these two. You can say these are the elements of Grand Austria that I like in Golem, but I think it stands alone, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. I actually think it was during my first play where I kind of expected Grand Austria, but I quickly saw it was quite a bit different. I mean, it has a mechanic there that's similar, but that's about the end of it. So my number 9 is a game that we've played somewhat recently. This is another game we got at Gen Con. But I've only had a chance to play it more recently. I've played it a few times now, and we just played it last night before we recorded this. And that is Unsettled from Orange Nebula. This is a game that is on my list for one specific reason, and we talked about this ad nauseum last night. This is a game that takes a puzzly mechanic that's pretty good, and a theme and narrative that's pretty good, and the fact that they marry the two so well, it makes both of those things really good.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
and I'm not sure, we had this conversation about, like, is the theme itself good? Is the game itself good?
Right.
And they're good. But together, they're great because they both serve each other so well.
Would
You
you
don't see this in every game out there.
Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, it makes the person that I was last night talking like defend the theme more
Yeah.
or defend the gameplay more because they both come together and work so well. It's like, no, there's something more going on for me as far as the gameplay. And then now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, it's just good. And then this one is
because
just
it's
good.
all one thing.
But together, like multiply.
It
Right.
comes
You put it
together
together.
so well that it becomes its own thing. You really shouldn't dissect it. It really, at the end of the day, is after I went to bed last night, I was like, the answer is don't look at one part or the other.
Yeah.
Look at the
them
game,
together.
which is
Unified
really what we were
experience.
ultimately talking about. Unsettled is a highly narrative game where it has all these different planets you can explore, and the planets come in their own individual boxes. There's a lot of game here because each planet has 3 different tasks or effectively scenarios to do, which very much change up the experience of exploring that planet.
Yeah.
It's like a completely different scenario, and you just don't know what's going to happen. The feeling of discovery in this game, just imagine like old time science fiction where it's like quiet and you're just going out and you're exploring. It's not about like going out and killing aliens or anything like that.
There is no killing aliens.
No, it's about going in and like, oh, there's all this pollen in the air.
Yeah.
Should we breathe it in?
Right.
And you start to learn that there's things that feel like, oh no, we shouldn't do that because it's bad. And then all of a sudden the narrative pivots and you're like, oh, actually maybe we should be doing that.
Yeah.
And the game goes in so many wild directions. In the scenario we played last
It was
night,
absolutely
it
wild.
was literally all over the table.
It was
Chaos.
crazy.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Unsettled, if you like that sort of thing, highly narrative experience, it's co-op obviously. Unsettled is definitely worth checking out. It's my number 9.
Definitely. Yeah, that game. That game
Jeremy wants to talk about
Seriously.
Unsettled now for the rest
that
of
game
the
leaves
time.
an impression. It just leaves an impression. My number 9 is a game where when I played it, I was like, there's just not 10 games better than this game this year, and that is Cascadia. Like, Cascadia is just, it may not be people's favorite game. I can see how it wouldn't blow people out the park, but it's a game that I could play with absolutely everybody. Like, I can play with anybody, and there is something to say about a game like that. And I just think it's one of the better games that you can play with everybody. I don't even know if it needs expansions. I don't know if I don't know.
Oh, but there's so much room.
But there's so much room, and the game is just good enough on its own. Like there are games that I go like, okay, so then we should like get the expansion right away. There's some opportunity to put this on this board. Yeah, they could add more cards, but just the simpleness of having a good enough drafting. The drafting is interesting just enough. It's not that hard. Then you're putting these lands together. That's not that hard. And you have to get things 3 in a row or in a small group. That's easy to explain to a lot of people. And I just find that there's something pleasing about that and relaxing about the game.
It is chill.
It's very chill. It's the beginning of the night and in the middle of the night for people who are a little bit more experienced maybe. Hey, we want to play one more game for 45 minutes. Let's play this game. And I don't think people would say no. That's the thing. It's like, it's one of those games. It's like, well, it's not going to blow me away. Well, we don't want to play another Heavy Euro for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Why don't we play this game?
That's exactly how it's been
the
used.
solo mode, you can have literally just have a cup of coffee and just play.
That's great.
That's good.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Cascadia does feel like a wake up on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Instead of reading the newspaper like they did back in the day,
Yeah.
sit down and just play
Play
I
Cascadia.
mean,
some
like
tiles.
literally, this is one of those games. There's also games like this where I always say like you can have a conversation with somebody and just play
And
the
play.
game. Yeah, you could have like a conversation about anything and you would just play the game. And I really love to have those type of games in my collection. Like those are permanents for me.
Yeah.
Sticking on the theme of animals, my number 8 was a little bit surprising to me, honestly, which is
intrigued.
Ark Nova.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were going to say, actually.
Neither did I.
There you go, surprises all around. But it was surprising to me because the first time I played Ark Nova, I actually didn't like it. And you guys asked what I thought, and I had 3 separate little Post-it notes of all of my notes on what I didn't like about the game. But then we played it again for the live stream, and I really enjoyed it. And I think that... So it still made my list because, again, if I was looking at games and you said play one game, it would be one of the ones that I would gravitate towards. And that's really just my personal bias of like, I like those tableau building games, I like heavier games, and I think there's a lot in that experience. But I think the game is great and it can be great on your first playthrough. I do think there are things that take away from it, which makes it hard, again, to accessibility's point, would make it hard for me to bring it to the table at any point. I'd really have to pick my moment to say like, okay, get down, get ready for this tableau builder. It's going to be long. It's going to be a lot to read, a lot of cards to get used to, but it can be really rewarding if you get through that and you enjoy the experience. So still made my list, but it was a surprise.
I suspect Ark Nova might be mentioned again today.
Yeah, I think so too.
You know, you're right on with that. You're going to hear Ark Nova compared to Terraforming Mars a lot. I think Terraforming Mars was the same way. Your first game can be 4 hours, but once you learn the game, it's not going to be.
Your 7th game can be 4 hours, depending on
It would be, but it's probably not.
who you're playing.
Put it on player count. It's just a long game. It's okay. It is a long game. Yeah.
All right. Number 8 for me is a game called Riverside. This was just a little roll and write in a little box that I wasn't expecting a whole lot. I love roll and writes. I thought, okay, we actually played this at a time when I had played a bunch of roll and writes, and we were just trying to play through some roll and writes. And this
you
one
played
really,
some good ones too, by the way.
Well, this
you were playing Varuna. You were playing some good roll and writes.
But Riverside really stuck out to me to the point where I kept wanting to play it more and more. And the premise of it is so simple. I mean, you're on this like cruise going around this little board, and the board's made up of cards, so it can change every time. And you're literally just like bringing passengers onto a board, selling tickets, and seeing attractions. But the way that you're using the dice and the way that you're visiting these attractions by multiplying your dice values by tickets sold and trying to fill up these different rows. But what really makes the game a challenge is that you can visit an attraction multiple times, but you have to score higher every time you visit it.
Do it, yeah.
So if your multiplier is not higher or not high enough, you're stuck. And you want to like really balance out, like score a little bit and then score a little bit more, and then like maybe come back to it for a huge score to your third time, and trying to figure out that path through a board that changes every single time you play the game. I think makes it a real puzzle with the roll and write. Plus, I don't think I've ever seen a roll and write use a board like that.
I haven't,
which was a very cool.
Change up board. You can change up the board.
And when I say board, it really is just like a row of cards, but still, it makes this map that's really cool.
Yeah, that's the whole concept of a roll and write with a central board that you're interacting with the roll and write is, I think, sort of the next step we're going to see a lot of.
Yeah, I'm hoping so.
I hope
it was really good.
I haven't played it. I definitely want to play it.
You probably really enjoy it.
We got to have you play that, and Let's Make a Bus Route.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to have you play that one.
So my number 8 is a game I've talked about quite a bit, and it's Jekyll versus Hyde. This is it was on my top 2-player games, and this is one of my top games of the year. I've played it a ton, and that's mainly because it's so easily playable and so quick to play. But it's a 2-player trick-taking game where one player is Jekyll, the other player is Hyde. Hyde wants unbalance, so they want to either win a ton or lose a ton. Jekyll wants balance, so they want to win as many tricks as they lose. So you play 3 rounds, and it is just this nice, fun, tight little trick-taking game that if you think you know trick-taking games, this is one of those games where you're like, oh, wait a minute, I got to rethink how I'm thinking about trick-taking, because you can get carried away and just start taking a bunch of tricks. And if you're Jekyll, you don't want to do that. So that's my number 8. I had a lot of fun with it. I think have you guys?
I haven't played it.
It's so
my
funny.
God.
We're like the 3 people you haven't taught it to yet.
We're not your friends at all.
I've been hoarding it all to myself.
We're not your friends at all, apparently. We ain't that tight. You think you grab one of us?
I've played it with Alicia a lot.
Yeah,
That's true.
So my number 8 is a game that kind of I pegged it right, and I was so happy I did, because importing things is not. It can go sideways on you, right? And that one is Bad Company.
That was fun.
I'm just thinking to myself, like, I had a thing with space-based, that type of game, and it was okay, but I kind of fell out of love with it over time. And this game does that better, and it's more thematic. So what happens is you're rolling these dice, and you are representing these criminals, like you're a crew of criminals, and they even have funny names that you put together, and it makes different boards, different combination of boards. And you're taking the dice, the 3 dice, and you're kind of making your own combination that you want, and you get to use 2 of those combinations, and the other players get to use 1 of the combinations. And then you're going to be placing those on your board, but there's also a chase scene going on another board where you also try to dodge the cops and get coins and extra points as well. And then they have this funny mechanic where you can add cards to the criminals on the numbers, and they get like this long body, like this super stretched out long body. It's comical, and the art really works, and it just makes you feel like this is some thematic and super silly. It's like you can have a crew called the Sneaky Tacos. You It's so stupid. Yeah, and I like the sneaky tackles or the lazy hood. I'm recalling the silly names and have all these stretched out guys and stuff. But that leads to like a lot of triggering of points. Yeah, when it has an actual theme to it and it feels like it, that just lifts it up. And I'm so glad I found that game. That was a really good game.
I forgot about that one, honestly. It probably should have made my list because it was really
you
good.
played that on
Put it on the live stream. I was just gonna say it's another shameless plug.
Really fun game.
And that's another one that almost feels like it could have been a roll and write.
Yeah.
Like it has that same kind of feel.
yeah.
And you know what? You nailed why I like it better than Space Base because you're not rolling the dice and stuck with it.
Yeah.
You can make these fun
Yeah.
little combinations. So you have a way more flexibility to hit the numbers that you need to hit.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. My number 7 is Maglev Metro. And this was one that I saw and picked up at Gen Con. And I really like the fact that, so in this game, you're building out a metro station, right? Which is super cool because it has these translucent pieces.
Yeah, it's
and
nice.
it actually looks like a metro map. So you're like, oh, cool. They fit on top of each other. And you're building out a little route. But it also has little people that you're putting on your own individual player board. And the people you pick up and put on your board are either passengers or robots. And the robots help you take actions at different values. So it gets a little complicated because throughout the game, you're moving robots to different actions to be able to take them at higher values. So like maybe I need to move 4 spaces. All right, I need 4 robots in there. But I also need to be able to pick up 4 passengers. And then I need to be able to move 4 again. And then I need to be able to drop them off. And then I need to be able to build a new route. So it's a really tricky puzzle if you're constantly moving things around your board. And I'm just really like enchanted by that mechanic. I really like it. And I just want to keep trying it and doing more with it.
And that's the thing. Like when you play this game, there's no one set strategy to win the game. You are like you're changing things on the fly. You're reacting to other people's lanes and stuff like that. You're like, oh, I see how I could get this, and I could take this opportunity to go all the way out. When you flip that board over, you go to the more open.
Oh yeah,
things get crazy. The lanes get crazy, and I just like that it's not like always an efficiency puzzle. There's just like this way that you actually have an action that says adjust, where you're taking things out and moving them around because you have to maybe switch your strategy up on the fly. But yeah, you can win this game anyway. That's how I feel like I've had that happen just by the cards, the scoring cards you get. You can really like go pound a whole bunch of points out, or you can just fill up your corner. But if you fill up the corner and you score more of your lanes plus the card, now you really got a lot of points. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it won so many ways, and I'm so happy that they have more maps coming out. And they have a lot of maps. That it seems like they're going to have a lot of maps, and that just makes me really intrigued like about the future of the game, which is something that I think makes this one attractive.
Cool.
All right, my number 7 is Red Rising, and for a lot of the same reasons that you like it. I actually played the game first, and I love the artwork and this concept of the world so much that's actually what got me out to go read the books. And, you know, you're right when you say that it is kind of like Fantasy Realms. It is kind of like Fantasy Realms. But I don't think that the comparison is fair. In fact, I would say that the game is actually very different from Fantasy Realms. It's very reactive, where I think Fantasy Realms is a very proactive game. In Fantasy Realms, you have this very small deck of cards. And if you have a card in your hand that says plus 40 points with Dragon, you know that Dragon's somewhere. It's either in someone's hand or it's like you can hunt for that card. Fantasy Realms, or I'm sorry, Red Rising, the deck is huge. And so it's not about looking at your hand and saying, oh, well, if we can get through this deck and find this whatever. It's about looking at your hand, looking at what's on the board, and making the best out of that situation.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Where Fantasy Realms is all about hunting for the perfect hand, Red Rising is about making the perfect hand out of what you can access. Yeah. Because you're not going to get through that whole deck. Which also means every game of Red Rising is very different because you're seeing combos and card connections in your 10th game that you didn't see in your first 9.
You might not even see a particular card in several plays.
Oh, yes.
Right, because
it's a big deck of cards.
And they do have like a whole, one of the whole colors, orange color, kind of lets you use them as wild so you can kind of fill in some of the things that you're missing if you can't find that one specific card you need. But it's just so different. It feels so different from Fantasy Realms, which I love, but I think that this has room as well. I think you can play, if you play both of them back and forth, you'd say, well, that they felt so different. And that's why I still really love Red Rising.
Yeah, and I would say, too, the last thing on Red Rising, it's not on my list. I don't know if it's on your list, but it is a game that even if you aren't familiar with the novels, the game itself, I've played it, I enjoyed it. I played it with Alicia, who, like, neither of us had any relationship with these characters.
Sure. Well, I didn't when I first played it either.
But the gameplay is so much fun, and I do think you guys nailed it on the head. The concept that it's not just a card hunt, which Fantasy Realms can kind of feel like it's just a card hunt. This has a lot more going on for it, I think, for sure. All right, so my number 7 is also kind of a non-Euro game, and it's a game that you introduced to me, and I think you did too. So Clover.
Yeah, game is so much fun.
Yeah.
I need to play this.
It's so much fun.
Without question, let me think. I'm pretty sure without question, this year's Just One, this year's Codenames.
Yeah.
It's the 2021 game that falls into that category. Yeah. And I'll tell you this, up until, even after it's described to you, even after you sit down and you have the components in your hand and you're about to start your first round, you're sitting there writing your clues on this thing, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, no one is going to get this. Right. How is anyone possibly going to get this?
By the way, also,
I'm having a hard time coming up with a clue.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's like you're looking at your clue, like there's no way anybody's going to get this.
I can't even connect these two words.
You're like, I don't even know what to write here. And
so to give you an idea, you have these cards, and you're basically coming up with a clue that ties to two words around this clover, and then you ultimately lay that out with the cards shuffled and laid out face up in front of it, and all the rest of the players at the table have to put the cards back where you had them based on the clues that you have around the clover. And I'm telling you, the moment you put it down there, I thought, after you guys had sold it so well, I thought, this is going to be awful. And then player after player, I thought it was miraculous that we were all nailing it. We were getting like 3 cards and 4 cards right off the bat. And it was like, what? How is this possible?
I think it's because every card is the square, at least these fun moments where you're like, oh, the top one is plant. Oh, flower, and you put flower under plant. But then you realize that the left side of that card has nothing to do. And you're like, well, that can't possibly be it. Then.
So it brings in this Sudoku level of deduction.
Exactly.
Where you could get a card that this card's on lock. We know this card's right because it worked perfectly. And then you can use that to kind of get into the head of the person and go, okay, so if they're thinking this for this, maybe this one works for there. And they're like, okay, and that one works for that too. And you can slowly deduce your way around the board.
Yeah.
Brilliant game. I think the only knock that I'd say for So Clover is the components, while very cool, cards are going to fall off the components.
You got to be a little careful. Yeah, there's nothing holding them in exactly. Right.
It's a delicate balance to hold it, but great game. That is my number 7.
Number 7 is a game I reviewed very highly for the channel, and it's probably my bias because I had such a connection with my son with this game.
I know what it is.
And the high quality of the product and all the high quality of that publisher as a whole. That is Kabuto Sumo.
Yep.
Kabuto Sumo has its share of issues, but there's something about that coin push type game that slow drip works for me because of the feedback is such a payoff when you finally knock something off. And even just knocking something, not even the player off, like for me, it's still like, ooh.
Other stuff.
Push. And like the fact that you have these different types of ways you push stuff in. Like there are different pieces. Like there's a gigantic poo ball, like you're pushing a poo ball. Like you're pushing or like you're supposed to like mess up people, like who are all around you. So if you're stuck with somebody, you control them or something like that. It's just, that was just a fun touch. And I understand some of the people's feedback, but it's just like it just doesn't matter to me. I really just have such a fun, childish love for that game.
Yeah, it's good.
And my son just asked me. He was like, "Can we play the sumo push game?" And I just was like, "Of course, anytime. Like I will play that game anytime." Yeah,
that's great.
I love it. I love that that's on one of our lists at least. I'd forgotten about that game. Yeah. Emily, does your next one have poo balls in it?
It does not, but it does have fairies.
Fairies.
Does have fairies.
Call back to a recent review I did for Funfair. Is my number 6. Yeah. I really like this game. Again, did a whole review on it versus its original Unfair.
Yeah.
I do love Unfair even more, but Funfair again got to the table quite a few times this year.
Unfair's unfair though.
Yeah, I know.
Stays on theme.
But that is really why I didn't like it.
True.
But Funfair is just fun,
exactly.
So it's even easier to get to the table. It made me think a lot of what you were saying right now, Jeremy, too, where it's just like, it's just so easy to bring out and to say like, let's go build a fair together.
Right,
This is fun. I love tableau builders. You can really bring anyone to the table with it. The theme keeps you engaged with it the entire time, and it's a much quicker play this time. So really enjoyed Fun Fair.
It cuts
this
it
year.
down to like, I mean, like honestly, it cuts like an hour and a half off those type of games.
Easily.
Where if you play a 4-player game of Unfair, it could be 2-3 hours, whereas this one is like an hour tops.
Yeah, it's quick. It's quick.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
What's
All
your
right,
next one?
number 6 for me is Nidavellir, which is
Hey, you pronounced it right.
I hope I did.
Nidavellir.
That's how I've been pronouncing it. It's a hard name to pronounce. It's not an English
It
word,
is.
but
It is.
this is kind of like a Norse-based game, but it's a simple game where you're collecting these dwarves, and it's set collection. These dwarves are all different colors. But what's really, really cool here is it's just an auction mechanic. You're all bidding on each of these rows by playing coins face down, and you reveal them, whatever. You draft an order, but each one of these dwarves scores differently. So you're scoring one where it's just the sheer number of them you have. There's one where it just escalates. There's one where you have the number times the values. There's one that just adds up values. Like, there's all of these different scoring mechanics with these dwarves. And every time you make a full row, you get to draw from this pile of hero dwarves that do a whole bunch of things. Can kind of feel like you're breaking the game. They really feel like you're cheating. And I like that when you draw a card, you're like, oh, this card's so good. Like, how can this be a card I have? But they're all like that. They're all these really, really powerful cards. And there's nothing more satisfying, I think, in any game that I've played this year of, like, finishing a row and then winning one of those special cards and then adding that card that completes a second row and then just immediately getting another one. Like, it feels really good. And it's a quick game. I mean, you're playing for, like, 45 minutes. And it's set collection, I think, at its finest. And really, you're scoring points like crazy. You're getting scores in the 300 to 400 point value, which is just fun. Like that just all works together really well for me. Sure. Yeah, it's just a very satisfying game. You're very rarely going to have a game where you're just unsatisfied by it.
Nice.
All right, so my number 6 is a game that I've played probably as much, if not more so, than Jekyll versus Hyde.
Oh wow.
And it is Trek 12.
Okay, yeah.
I've played this, I don't know, probably 20 plus times.
Sure.
And in a variety of different ways. A lot of those times have just been playing the sort of first map by itself. But Alicia and I have gotten into the campaign a little bit where you play all 3 maps and you're unlocking envelopes. This is a roll and write. But the interesting thing about this roll and write, for me anyway, is that it does not fall into that category of combo-centric roll and write.
Sure.
It's a puzzle roll and write. Mm-hmm. This is not it doesn't have that satisfaction of like, oh, I'm firing off and linking things. But it does have that satisfaction of like, oh, okay, what do I need next? I'm going to put this here, but I might be screwing myself if I put this here. And then the dice get rolled. And unlike a lot of roll and writes, when these dice are rolled, people are going, come on, 7, come on, 7, come on. So you're really rooting for those numbers. It is and it's gorgeous looking. I love the artwork. I love the concept. And that campaign, we haven't even gotten close to getting all the envelopes open because you actually have to do achievements when you're playing in that mode to unlock an envelope. And
I like that inclusion.
Whoever happens to do it gets to open the envelope. And usually that envelope has an impact on the game for everyone in the next time you play. But it also has a special bonus for that player to start with in the next time they play too that kind of benefits them. We've played it. In fact, we played it with the audience even on our stream. And I think it is now just becoming available or about to become available. So this was a tricky one to include on the list, but it was supposed to come out like at Gen Con, then PAX, then this, and because of all the shipping issues, it just didn't happen. But I wanted to highlight it here just so that when it does hit right now, that you've all heard about it and you should check it out.
That was one of the games that I tried to import. I was waiting. I was like, please, no French edition. English, come on. And then I was so glad that Panasaurus announced that they were bringing it over. And it paid off. It was a really fun game.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I think, from what I understand, they have plans to support it for some time. I know there's a lot of content that exists overseas.
Awesome.
So there's that plus even more cool stuff related to that.
I like seeing, and I love seeing roll and writes with campaign content. Like it just makes me feel
Well, it was
good.
also nice that it was not just more combo, which most, I think, roll and writes fall into that category, so it's nice to have that mix.
Yeah.
All right, let me tap in. Is this 6?
It is.
Yeah, 6.
All right, here. So my 6, Fun Fair. I started out the year playing that game like That's another one of those games. Played it for 2 weeks straight. I was trying to play it with everyone. I was playing it on TTS. My friend at lunchtime, we just went at it every day. I love Unfair, but I love what this game does because it keeps the same tableau building.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's the thing. That's the part that people love. It's the other part that people hate, like that really hate on that other parts
one
of
of those
like that.
people.
But the thing is that this one does it where it's a partnership. Like it's like, hey, if I
Yes.
help you out,
Yes.
Yeah.
then you get something else. Now, I don't know if they have plans to do expansion for this one, but I really hope they do.
It'd be cool.
But if you like Unfair, there are some expansions coming
Yeah.
to fill up that box, and I'm
Oh,
excited
boy.
about that as well. So yeah, I just overall, I just think it's a really smart turn, and it wasn't unexpected, which is even more important. It's like, hey, I know you liked Unfair. I remember the publisher was like, I know you liked Unfair a lot. And he was like, you might want to check this out. And it just blew me away. Like,
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
blew me away. I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I wanted. Yeah.
Very cool. We are we're at the halfway point.
Halfway point.
So number 5, and this is one that has already been mentioned. Ooh, what are your
Okay.
guesses? Riverside.
Yay.
yeah.
I'm glad.
I
We played
mean,
that together for the first time.
I know, and here's what I would say about it, why it made it so high on my list, is that it's a great roll and write. The accessibility is crazy in that,
Oh,
like,
sure.
our game group loves heavy Euros. Like, that is what we gravitate towards every time. And yet we pulled it out multiple different nights because we were like, Riverside again? Just a little warm up with Riverside.
That's
Riverside.
good.
Yeah.
And you know, if I can play it with both my family and my heavy gaming group, and they both would like to play it again, like it's amazing, right? And I'm like, that has to go in the collection. Plus, what you didn't mention too is that it's a cruise around the Arctic, right? So you're going with like polar bears and reindeers, and I just think the theme hasn't been overdone either. So it's really fun. to
Even the
just pull
dice,
out.
like the dice, like there's a heat die and like
Yes.
Yeah.
like, yeah. There is something there that does a little
Yes.
of that.
Well, and I
theme there,
think that you hit it on the head with that because it's so simple that anyone can learn it,
Yep.
but there's so much depth.
There's so
Yeah.
much
And you know what?
stuff
If you're casual players probably won't get the full like combo-y strategy, but they'll still
it's
have
still fun.
there. Fun. They will
And
still have
you're
fun.
still going to enjoy it. And you know what? If you play with gamers along your same level as you, you're gonna you're gonna be competitive
yeah,
with them, right?
and they're going to
So-
score a lot of points.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's one of those games. Even if you lose, you're still scoring a ton of points.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I got 323. Hey, I got 246. Oh, I got 212.
Yeah.
But I
Are
those
those
had a
real
chance.
scores?
Yeah.
Are those the kind of scores you get?
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
getting
because
like the 100.
it's a lot of
multiple-
multipliers.
Yeah, there's a lot of multipliers in it,
Well,
yeah.
that's just satisfying.
Yeah,
isn't
it
It
is
is,
very
it's fun.
exciting.
Yeah, and it's another one of those ones where like you'll score your lowest one twice. So
Yes.
like you want to like balance, and when you hit that perfect
like,
balance where you
holy.
did well in everything,
Right.
you're like, oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really getting points
Cool.
here. All right, so my number 5 is Boone Lake. This is I know the first time it's been mentioned.
Yeah.
This is a Fister game, which I mean I love Fister. I love Maracaibo, one of my favorite games. Great Western Trail. Boone Lake follows in the footsteps of those games, but makes it I don't want to say simpler because it's not, but I do think if accessibility is the word of the day,
Yeah.
it makes those games more accessible. Boone Lake is not
definitely.
nearly as complicated of a game to learn or play as Maracaibo.
It isn't.
But it still has a lot of that same the feeling of like player controlled game speed. You're not moving around an ocean, but you're moving down this river and you're making stops along the way, and you're deciding how far you want to go. But the real star of Boone Lake is the action selection system.
100%.
And I feel like this is probably going to be on other lists, so I'm not going to harp on it for too long. But it does have one of the coolest action selections I've ever seen, where where the tiles will move, and the number of spaces that you get to move across the water are based on the actions that aren't being picked as much.
Yeah.
So if you want to move a lot of spaces, you're taking actions that no one's taken, maybe because they're not good situationally or just because people don't see the value in them. And when you're timing those actions, it can lead to some really, really satisfying turns.
Yeah, and some very tense moments where you're like, don't use that action right now.
Yes,
I want to
yes.
use that action. Almost like a worker placement. It's not that, but it's that same level of tension where you're like, don't go there. Do not do that because it
I wanna do
weakens the
that.
power.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. My number 5 has already been mentioned also.
Ooh.
And I was following it, my last roll and write with the opposite. And this is Hadrian's Wall, the more complex, absolutely combo-licious roll and write. And we talked about it already, but I just want to say this one more time. The combos in this game, I don't know that I played another game this year that had that combo feel of like bing, 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 and you're just triggering things off. And I'll say it once more. the fact that you have pieces that you're like grabbing and taking as you do those combos just makes that process that much more fun to me, because it's one thing to just move around a pencil, but when you're just grabbing stuff, it just feels fun.
The physicality of it,
Yeah, Hadrian's Wall, fantastic game. It is a teach.
Yeah, you know what? That's
not
a piece
complicated
of feedback.
to play.
It's not complicated to play, but you do have to get a lot of up front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to get a lot feed. You got to get a lot.
If someone's learning at the table, the teach is going to be a while. Period.
Yeah.
You'd have to go over all those things, but it is it's so worthwhile.
Yeah. My number 5 is already been mentioned. It's just connected a little bit more with me, and that was Maglev Metro. This, I guess, the only difference that the only thing I would add to this is that pick up and deliver. I have 2 games on my list that they're like my 2 least favorite mechanics.
Pick up and deliver is one of them.
Well, pick up deliver is one of them. It just doesn't work for me. But this one here is because of the engine building that comes with that. It makes it really, really nice. And I think about a game called like Wasteland Express. Like,
I remember that.
Like there's just like something that part of that dies off, and I don't like that die off. Whereas this one is like combo, keep going, keep going. Whereas that game has one mechanic that's like, no, you slow down now, and it's so slow to get back up. Whereas this one here, just you can actually change how you move around and how fast you do, or you can just go like, I'm going to pick up all these people and I'll move this and this, and it's just definitely it just has a different twist and more into what I like, and I think that combination that I like so much. And like I said, I know that there's more support coming for it, so it makes me even more happy. So
that's good. That's always nice.
Yeah.
My number 4 has not been said yet. A game a little bit earlier in the year, Corrosion.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to put that on my list.
You know what? Spoiler, it almost made it on my list.
I almost put it on my list, yeah.
So it did make my list, and I just really enjoyed it. We did a first impressions video on it. The puzzle aspect of it, and the fact that you're using time as you're going around. You're like getting these resources, but they're also going to rust and die off.
Right.
I really love it. And when I was thinking again, which games would I want to play right now? I was like, we could get Corrosion back on the table. That'd be a fun one to keep playing. Yeah. And so it made it really high on my list because I really enjoyed it.
You know what? It almost made mine. I cut it. Even this morning, I was down to 12. I couldn't decide. And the only reason I cut it is just because of the length. I think that
it's an investment again.
It's an investment of time, and I think it's too long for what it is. Yeah. But I've noticed this when we played together or when I've played it. If you're pushing the end game, if everyone is pushing the end game,
make it faster.
It's like 90 minutes and it feels really good. Yeah. But if you have people that are meandering or just trying to get the most out of every single action, the game can just go on and on and on. And like that's not really a criticism of the game. There's a lot of games where it's like player controlled endings. Yeah. You need to push that ending.
Well, we should also say what the game was like. So you are basically you have this system where you have a whole bunch of cards. You're trying to build these projects or something like that. But
machines.
You're trying to beat those little machines on your board, which give you different scoring things. But there's a trigger. There's a system of how your board moves where the cards that you're playing, and there's like a cycle of that.
And you need to do that to get the cards back.
They corrode. The engineers work. They come back when their shift is up, but the pieces will all corrode that you've collected. So
it's got a timing element that's very, very
It's really smart and unique. That's another one with a good solo mode.
Yeah, well, another one we did. You could watch our first impressions and learn a lot more about it.
Yeah.
Listen to Ryan with all the plugs.
No, you plug hard, man.
All right, this is number 4, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so my number 4 is also Hadrian's Wall.
Oh,
talked about it a lot. This game hit me in all the right ways, all of the combos, all of the fun things you can do in the game. Plus, I like the theme of it. And I like that it's Hadrian's Wall. It literally is about defending Hadrian's Wall. Mm-hmm. But a lot of what you're doing internally on the board, it's not like you're just fighting these barbarians, right? Like you're doing
one aspect.
That's just one small aspect of the game. You're doing all these cool things like participating in gladiator fights or appealing to the Senate.
That's my favorite board.
The Actors Guild.
Or interacting with the Drama Guild. Yeah, I mean, there's every part of that game almost feels like little mini games that are happening while you're playing.
For sure.
And we're all doing all these different little mini games with the same boxes, and all of it's kind of pushing you towards going up these different tracks, and which is another thing I love. I love going up tracks. And the higher you get on these tracks, the more points you score. I mean, this is the game that when I played, I was like, okay, we played it that entire night. Because once you learn it, once you get past that teach, the game is not that long. Maybe it's like an hour. When you're playing solo, much less.
That's much less.
You can play a solo game pretty quick, and I don't play a ton of solo, but that is one that I have played a lot of solo.
That game plays really well at all player counts. I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's
easily.
one thing I don't know that we mentioned. It's not real time. I'm sorry, simultaneous.
Yes.
So you're not always sitting there waiting for other people to take their actions.
Right.
You're doing your thing, and you're just like you're checking this box to check this box to check this box, and it has physical resources. So as you're checking these boxes, you're just like I'm starting to grab all these resources.
People can trade like they do.
Yeah, you're grabbing all these
meeples,
you're grabbing all these resources, you're trading with other people, you're spending, and you're kind of watching what other people are doing because they might give you resources that you need to do some of your actions, and all of that just really came together for me.
Yeah, and like the last thing on that, and like a good Euro, that game has aspects on those sheets that by the end of it, you may have not done at all.
Yeah.
And this
That's
person
fine.
over here did all these other things than you did. So at the end of the game, you feel like you all got your points in very, very different ways, and you're like, oh, I didn't even do the gladiator thing.
Yeah, I want to
go
try that.
But you see another player doing it, and you're like, oh, that seems fun. And he's killing it with it, like literally. So yeah, Hadrian's Wall.
Literally
really
because it's
good.
gladiators.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Thanks. Thanks for the explanation.
All right.
All right, my number 4 has already been mentioned. I think this is going to be said a lot coming down
as we
here
go.
at the end. It is Ark Nova. This game, if you don't know anything about it, it is a zoo building game that is a tableau builder. It's got a lot of things going on for it. The action mechanic in this, which we haven't really touched on today, is very, very cool in that it's kind of like Civilization New Dawn, where you have these cards that kind of like power up, and when you use it at 5, it goes back down to 1. So you're going to have to let that come back up before you can use it at its most significant power. This game, mark my words, as it finds its way more and more to all the markets globally, is going to end up being one of the next big things. This is like terraforming Mars level, and that's a big comparison that's made, but I'm just comparing it to the sort of impact on the hobby.
Sure.
It will have that, I think, level of impact on the hobby.
I totally agree.
So that is my number 4.
My number 4 is a game that I played one time. And it
This is the one.
Made that much of an impact on me. And also another mechanic that I don't necessarily like, but I've warmed up to, and that is area control, area influence type stuff, is Ankh. Man,
What?
Wow. That experience was so good. I was like, I was sitting in the middle of that game, and I was just like, I'm so impressed by what this design is doing.
Wow.
The simplicity of the design and like how lethal and cutthroat it is. And I like stuff like that. Like I like a game that rewards aggression and timing, and that game does it. And then it's just a thing where it's just like when that merge mechanic starts a whole nother. Where I see people don't like it because some people don't like someone having any kind of impact on what you're doing, right? In this one, you're merging and kind of combining your power. But the conversation that happens, it's not like you get up and walk on the other side of the table. You are basically having like this, I'm going to do this, we're going to do this, kind of thing. And you got the cards. You're giving them their cards. You're giving them your cards. And people can come back. And we had such a tight game where like literally the person, there were like 5-7 points behind me who was in the front. I was a little bit behind the leader. I caught up to the leader, past the leader. And then all of a sudden, they made like 2 plays and they came roaring back.
Oh, wow.
And it all came down to like the last battle. And I was just like, this is absolutely amazing. And I watched the abilities, how the abilities play out. And it's just, there were so many things there. I was just like, if this is the way that these area control type games work, this is the one that I want to, this is the one for me.
Wow.
And then I'll start from here. I was like, I'll start from here. Like, this is it.
That's cool to see it on the list. I mean, Ankh was a big release this past year, and I wasn't expecting that it would be on any of our lists, but cool.
That's awesome. So number 3, I did not have the same rules as Ryan, which is that this is an expansion. So this is Dune Imperium Rise of It.
Yeah, I figured it would be.
Yeah,
it would
of
be
course.
way up there
I mean,
for me,
what
too.
It would have been. If I was adding expansions, it would have been. That's why I didn't do
Well, I didn't have the same rules, so I got here.
was
Number
a personal
3.
rule.
Her own rules.
It was a personal rule for me, just because I didn't want to talk about the same games twice. But yeah.
I mean, I love Dune Imperium. It's a great deck builder, and you've got all the little elements of combat. And what the new expansion does is that it takes the market and changes it up. And now you have these dreadnoughts as well that are coming into play, as well as these techs that you can take as well, which kind of break things and change the game. And it's awesome because you're just playing to 10 points. It's the race to 10, right? But also with these tech tiles, they have other end game conditions and things that are happening. So you're like, oh, but I had this thing that does this, and oh, but this thing was gonna actually give me a point here if this happened. It was very exciting. I really love it. And like if I saw it again and someone was like, hey, are you down to play Dune Imperium? Oh yes, 100%.
You know what's interesting about that is that, like, you know, people have an issue with like the intrigue cards like taking over, and like that just changes it up. Like I have a whole nother threat for it to counteract that. No matter what you have hiding, I have an ability that does this, and it puts a whole different type of pressure on you. And those intrigue cards are not so intriguing.
Well, and not just that, but the cards that get added into the main deck.
Yes.
There's a huge amount. Enough that the main deck feels different, and a lot of these
those cards feel different,
and those cards
feel way different. Yeah,
the ones that trigger when you discard them to some other effect, and like now you're not just discarding a card, but you're getting the full value of a card for discarding it. It just felt really good.
See, we're about to go full in on this.
Like, that's how
serious that expansion is. It makes a great game greater.
Yeah,
you know,
Ryan had a rule, and Emily just let him break it.
I'm just saying, we'll talk. You'll see it when I talk about. I'm sure that'll make it to my top 5. So. Number 3,
Number
right?
3?
Yep. Yeah, number 3 for me is Mind Management. This is a hidden movement style game that's unlike any other hidden movement style game I've ever seen, because, of course, like you have the Mind Management agent that's behind a screen making their moves on this grid. Sure, that's, kind of familiar. But the way that they're moving across this grid, and you can only move orthogonally, and you can never go back to a spot that you've been before, you can really start to deduce what the Mind Management agent is trying to do. They're trying to make a path that hits these very specific icons on the board. Every square has a number of different icons. So even if you know that they were in a square, you deduce that they were in a square, you don't know which icon they're trying to get. But then you notice, well, they were in these 2 squares. These 2 squares share this icon. So maybe this is the icon he's going for, or maybe it's just a coincidence and he's getting different icons from different squares. So you have to try to gather as much information as you can, try to deduce what he's going for, see the path that he's taking, and try to figure out where he's going next. So all of that is happening together. Yeah. So there's an element of deduction that I don't think I've seen. Like, I love Letters of Whitechapel, but that's more about just like, where is he? Where's he going? You're not trying to deduce all this information like you are. And not to mention that Mind Management gives you all these different powers, and the fact that
the dolphin.
As you play the game, you're unlocking these different packs, and
that part is insane.
It feels
there's so
good.
much content there.
Yeah, and there's a ton of content, ton of replayability, and it's just fun.
Yeah.
It's just pure fun. I would play that game anytime. So
we're probably gonna play it
right now.
That's it.
Yeah, we might be talking about Mind Management even more.
But
not quite yet. My number 3 is Cascadia.
Okay.
Cascadia, we've already talked about this one, and I'm just going to reiterate one thing. This game is the most accessible game that has so much to offer both enthusiast gamers and casual gamers that I've seen this year. And I've had conversations with people where they're asking, like, why is it such a big hit? Like, they've played it, and they're like, it's okay. And that is why it's such a big hit. And I do think, we talked about expansions. There could be expansions, but the more I thought about it after you mentioned that earlier, I do think Cascadia, as it stands, is one of those games that's perfectly, elegantly designed the way it needs to be. Yeah. If they do more content, I would just like it to be more of that.
Yes.
Not more things to do.
Right.
It's
got to be streamlined.
More animals, so I don't have to play with that same animals, but it's the same game. Because when you start to add too much to a game like that, it ruins the sort of elegance and the simplicity of it. And I think that's right where it needs to be.
If they just added a 5th, like another player, and 5 more cards, that's fine.
You just need variety, basically.
Sure.
Not
variety.
different mechanics, just new variety. And I think that's what people would be happy with. But again, the game on its own stands really, really well, and that is why it's my number 3.
So this game that is my number 3 is a good example of like how you give something that had a previous theme or a same designer or something like that another chance. Like you just kind of go like, oh, I didn't like this one and I didn't like that one, so I probably don't like this designer, or I don't like the type of games that are in this universe. Well, I liked everything else in the role player universe except for role player. Oh. So
interesting.
So when Role Player Adventures came along, I kind of dismissed it, but then I played it for a live stream at our channel. Jeez.
Ryan's taught him well.
And I was blown away by this game. I remember when I talked to Keith about it, I was like, I don't know, man. I'm not a huge fan of Role Player. And he was like, it's going to have a full story. It's going to have these scenarios. And I mean, seriously, like there's a full, you can create your character for a role player, but that kind of throws things off a little bit. They have 30 some pre-built characters, so you don't have to think about that. And then you're off into this adventure, and each one's an adventure book. And they have like it's not really a choose your own adventure, because it kind of, you're only going to the certain places and you kind of have to backtrack in a lot of places anyway. But I mean, it just has like this nice level up system, loyalty system. And the interesting thing about how you play this game is the stat checks are actually like a hand management plus dice rolling thing, where you only roll the dice once, but you're trying to manipulate them using your cards that are literally the cards from Role Player. They are almost the exact same. They will pip the die up, change how the colors are used in the game, and you're going to have a certain amount of turns to help them fulfill the requirements for skill checks and for like combat. And it's just a really interesting twist on that. I can't stress enough how easy this game is to put out and put back.
For as big as it is,
how well
for
organized
sure.
and how big it is. I mean, we're talking, if we were even playing at max player count, we're talking like 5 minutes max for setup.
Yeah.
And it's just, I just can't stress enough how much a surprise that was for something like I didn't necessarily I was so apprehensive about going into. So yeah, that one, Role Player made an impact. And by the way, if you watch my solo top 10, it should have been on there. And I made a mistake.
It would have been on my top 10.
Yeah.
I almost put it in my top 10, except for the fact that I only played a prototype.
Yeah.
I haven't. My physical copy of it hasn't come in yet, so I haven't gotten a chance to really play through. So as I play through it more over 2022, I bet it will be, because everything you said about this game is true. Yeah. And the one thing that you left out that I was waiting for you to talk about was the way you can combine items in your hand to try to trigger things.
Yeah, I know.
And like you're looking, it's so cool. So you'll encounter something, and it gives you a number, and you look through all the items in your hand, and you add those two numbers together, you flip to a different page, and it tells you what happens.
By the way,
so it's really cool.
It almost feels like the way Unlock works sometimes.
Oh, it does. I mean, it has that feel a little bit, and it really feels like one of those adventure games where you're clicking on everything in your inventory, saying, one of these items is going to do something.
What does that do? And the thing is, to top on that, it's actually a testament to how good the writing is.
Yeah.
Because it actually doesn't have like one sentence. It'll be like, so-and-so uses his fireball, and yet it makes the flame that, like, it's very like D&D, like if you had it, like you wrote something in response to something you did.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
And it's just, it's not half done. Nothing in the writing to me was like, whatever, wonk wonk.
No, it was good.
It was like really good stuff.
And you can use those items and search the map to find
new parts of the map. Yeah,
you can take the narrative in different directions.
Yep.
So like the story will change based on some of these things you do. So
you can actually get your own background story.
Yep.
Yeah, like they have an expansion where you just find your own background story, and then you create spaces on these maps when you get to them that you can go seek out your own personal quest.
It's great. You're gonna love it.
This is one of those games where I can tell the enthusiasm is infectious. Ryan and Ryan like, okay, let's talk about this.
Only because I really wanted to put it on my list. I just felt like since I hadn't actually seen, I haven't even like held the final product yet.
Yeah.
I just felt a little weird putting it on my top, but the prototype itself that we played last year was almost
and it gave you a good impression of the game. Yeah. That's why I was so excited about the game when I played it, because it gave you a full on expression of the first three scenarios. So I was like, okay, I know what this is going to be like.
Yep.
Well, talking about games that we were excited about, my number 2 was one that when we played it, I was like, this is going to be my number 1 for the year. This is going to be my number 1.
But it's your number 2.
It's not. It's my number 2.
Okay.
But Boon Lake. So we talked about
Yep.
it before.
Yep.
But again, it's just so satisfying. It has those multi-use cards that... Part of the action selection, too, is that it has colors for, like, day and night, and I think sunrise.
It's like sunrise, midday, and night.
So you have certain cards you can play depending on which action you take, and the actions you take also have a second half of it that the rest of the table gets to do following you. Mm-hmm. So there's just so much going on with it that I love. You have all these moments where you're building up your engine, and then you're getting to do cool things, and it's again player controlled for the ending. So you can race it and try to get to it very quickly, or you can take your time and really get to build everything out and do all the things you want, and just so many satisfying moments. This is everything I love in a game, and so it when I played it again, it was easily like this is going to be my top game. No hands down.
Yeah, it is solid. What's your next?
All right, number 2 for me is Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. This was just a fun version of Terraforming Mars. I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
Is that the end?
And that's it. No, it's it takes everything I love about Terraforming Mars, which is the card play. I mean, that engine building element of Terraforming Mars. It takes all of the satisfaction that you normally get in that engine building element, and it puts it in a game that's an hour to an hour and a half. You can have some games that go longer. It's still kind of player controlled a little bit, but it's very cool. The way that the actions unfold is everyone plays an action card and they reveal them, and those are the only actions that you're doing that round. So you might be doing 3 of the possible actions, or even 2 of the possible actions, and you kind of have to make do with what those are and try to figure out the best way to trigger your combos as you're taking actions. It feels good, it feels fun, and it feels like Terraforming Mars.
It is like a streamlined experience of the same game.
Yeah.
Like, you genuinely feel like you've played something very, very similar to Terraforming
and really
Mars
no
in the
setup.
end. And it's less setup. It does take less time, although probably a little bit more time than some people expected.
Well, sure, it's not going to be a 30-minute card.
No, it's not. It's not that
Mars.
fast. But it's a different way to play Terraforming Mars, really, at the end of the day. Yeah, it's really good. All right, so my number 2 has been mentioned already, and it is mind management.
I knew you were going to love that one.
I'm going to add just a little bit to this. Mind management, it is a hidden movement game. I've always loved the concept of hidden movement games. And one of the ones that I loved from way back in the day, I've mentioned it before, is Clue, the Great Museum Caper. And the reason this works, and this is a silly little like Milton Bradley game, right? Yeah. But it's in many ways quite similar. And one of the biggest things about this relative to things like Whitechapel or Fury of Dracula is that both Mind Management and Clue, the Great Museum Caper, can play so quickly that you could play again and someone else could take a turn being the main role, which is nothing you'd ever do, I don't think, if you're playing Whitechapel or Fury.
The last thing you want to do is play another game of Whitechapel.
No, exactly. Right. And so many people love it, and nothing against those games, but no one, no one wants to play that game immediately again. Mind Management is absolutely the opposite case. You could want to play this and play it, and not only that, but that you alluded to those boxes that you can open after you play, depending on which side won, you're able to open up a box and it changes the next experience, kind of making it a little easier for the side that lost.
Yeah.
And then if the other side wins the next game, then they open a box. Yeah. And it changes. And it's not just little buffs or bonuses. These are things that change the game,
the end game
significantly.
Actions, extra actions.
And there's a lot of these. I want to say there's like at least 6 or 7 boxes for each side.
Oh yeah, there's quite a few.
But Mind Management is really good. I had a chance to play it with my extended family over the holidays with nieces and nephews. They all absolutely loved it.
That's great.
This is another one of those games I think you could play with just anyone, and everyone will appreciate what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, my number 2 is Mind Management.
Let me rewind all of that and let Jeremy say some of it.
And I have a lot more to add. No, I don't. I will say this. This is one of those for me. Now, if most people don't know, like 2015-16 is when I came into gaming. So I don't have a lot of experience with some of the older type of games that inspired these games. But like this one right here is my hidden movement game to be toppled, by anyone. You say Letter Whitechapel, never played it. Fury of Dracula, never played it. Like, this is my game that I go, holy cow, like this was so fun to me. I want to show this game to so many people, and I want them to play it, and I can teach it fast. The training mode, I call it the training mode, but like the beginning mode is so easy. And then if you get somebody who wants to play it again, you're like, all right, now everybody knows the rules. We can add these rogues in here.
Yeah.
We can add, these more things in here. Or, like I've already played through the first 3 boxes that you open. I kind of know, all right, well, I can add this to it or whatnot, take it in and out. And then since people will be all into it, because I think most people who play this will be like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Yeah.
You can start adding those in right away and just be like, hey, let's just go through the shift system. Let's use it. I'm just very impressed by not only that, you don't have to know anything about the comics, graphic novel, whatever, to like this game.
No, not at all.
No,
Not at all. It's just, whether you like the art or not, if that's something
Sure.
that turns you off or on. But like everything inside the box, especially if you get the deluxe version.
Oh, the deluxe version is
The deluxe version is insane, and
Yeah.
I will say, I'll go on the record, I love the art, and like Red
I like the art a
Rising for
lot.
you guys, I got this game, and I ended up getting the graphic novel.
Oh, did you?
Oh,
you
yeah,
read the graphic novel?
I'm
Nice.
reading.
Oh,
it.
it's so good.
I take a look at a few pages before bed, like every night, and
One
go
of
through.
the best openings to a comic book
It
series.
is a great opening. It's one. I read the first 5 pages, and I'm like, wait a minute, I gotta think about all this for a second. That was heavy.
That's
And
so
it made you
good.
think it had the kind of Inception vibe to it. Yeah, I love it, and it's beautiful looking to me. It's got some wild art.
Yeah.
And I think you're
Yeah.
right. Some people will like it, some people won't, but I
It's a
love
very
that
specific
art.
style, yeah.
Very,
Yeah,
very cool.
Very, very. I'm playing a lot of games this year that made like an impact. Like they kind of
Yeah.
stuck with me. They make big firsts, big comebacks. Kind of highly. I thought this was a very interesting year of games.
I think you said it was your first. I will go on record. It is best in category.
Okay.
That
Oh, yeah, it is
hidden
the best
movement,
hidden movement game I've played.
no question in my mind, for me at least, it is the best of that category.
Yeah.
Period.
So bringing us to our number one,
Yeah.
top spot. Okay, so I feel like mine's like it's not really cheating. It does follow the rules. BGG says this is a 2021 release, and
We'll be the
I
judges.
played it this year, so that it can get. It's Azul Queen's Garden, which is
Yeah.
not widely
It came out
available
at
yet.
Essen.
It did
come
technically
out.
come out in Essen.
So I don't have a copy yet, which makes it feel like
I
feels a
haven't
bit
even gotten to play a full game of it yet.
But it's great. I love it so much. That's why I was like, should I put this on anticipated? Should I put this
Sure.
on top 10
It is
2021?
technically available.
But
Put it on both.
sure. But it is my number one game this year.
Yeah.
Again, if you put all of the games we've mentioned in front of me right now and said, which one do you want to play, Emily? I'd say, can we please play Azul Queen's Garden? It just takes Azul to a whole new level. It's got a little bit more complex things going on. I really love the reveals of every time on your turn you're revealing new tiles that you can take and that the rest of the table can take. I really enjoy what it's doing mechanically, where it's building on what you can do with Azul, where it's like tile drafting and placement on your board, and it's puzzly. But you've got now bigger hexes that you're using as well instead of just the ones, and you're also doing based on the number and the pattern.
Color pattern.
The color and the pattern. So it's got just so much more going on with it that I'm really excited to get it to the table.
For sure.
And I loved it.
I do want to say, I think this is worth saying, is this does not feel like Azul 4. Whereas the first 3 Azuls all kind of felt like they were variations on the first Azul. This one feels like it is like Azul Advanced level.
It's
like
the
this,
next-
it feels like this is a new trilogy because the tiles are different. The way you use the tiles is different. It shares a lot of DNA with with the original Azul game, but it is not a version of Azul. No. It's a brand new feeling game.
Yeah, it could have. I mean, it has enough DNA to
call it Azul.
Call itself Azul, but with it could effectively have been called the successor to Azul. In a way, and be named something else, but it has enough DNA, and obviously they want to call it Azul.
Yeah.
Well, sure, because you're still going to get that same core feeling that you get from Azul, but the way you're using colors and patterns is different. The way you're drafting is different. The way you're even building out your board is different.
There's a lot more. It's a gamery version. It's
for
just
sure.
been gamified even more. So yeah, it's really good.
I love it.
And it's fair. It's fair game. It's your
Thank
list,
you.
Emily. You
Thank
put
you.
one
yeah,
on it, what you wanna put
that
on
is a
it.
release, a physical release in 2021. I think it counts.
There you go. Easy.
So my number 1 is Ark Nova. That's another one because Ark Nova came out last year. We all got to play it. Some people in the U.S. haven't gotten their Ark Nova yet.
It's trickling out.
It's trickling out. This is a game that hit me for all the right reasons. I mean, there's a few things that I absolutely love in board games, and one of them is that feeling of like escalation, where you feel like you're just getting better and better as you're going. And you're definitely doing that in Ark Nova. You're drafting all these cards. You're getting all these different icons. You're getting more and more of these project cards that will all trigger. Your income is getting higher, so you're just getting loads and loads of money. And your ability to make these combos gets better because you're able to not only have those cards that get stronger as they move into that 5th slot, but also you can upgrade them, flip them over, and now you have an even stronger ability on the other side. And so deciding when to flip those and which ones to flip is a key part of the game. But between like the beginning turn and the last turn, like you're just playing such a different game. And I love that feeling of like just you're building and building and building to this like big climax where you're just scoring a ton of points. Because at the very beginning of the game, you're like, okay, you get to the first scoring phase, you're like, I got 4 points.
It's
okay.
slow going.
Right? You're like, how am I ever going to end this game if I'm only getting 4 points a turn? But then you're getting like 20 points a turn, and you're like, okay, now I'm seeing
that's
how
a
it
good
builds.
point, and that is always a very satisfying thing.
Yeah,
about a game.
that's reason some games maybe not didn't make my list is because I like that curve. I really like games that have that curve.
Yeah, it's slow potentially to get that curve started.
It can be, and that's the thing. Just like Emily said, your first game, maybe even your first 2 games, you might really struggle to get that curve going. But once you kind of figure it out, then and figure out the value of cards, because that's something in Terraforming Mars. It takes a long time because you look at this hand and you're like, these cards are great, but they're great in-game cards. You're not playing those cards for an hour, so don't hold on to them. Yeah. They're just holding up spots that you could be using to draw other cards and build your engine faster. And learning when to ditch a card, even if it's like the best card in the game, if it's the first turn, you're never going to play that card. Why? Don't try holding on to it. It's,
you got to know the game a little bit.
Right, you got to know the game to make these decisions. And once you do, it is a much smoother experience.
And it's unbelievably well produced. It's a beautiful game.
Yeah.
It's fun to go through all those cards and see all those animals.
Talk about a Terraforming Mars comparison. I mean, I look at this art and I'm like, this is gorgeous looking.
Compared to that,
It's really good. Well, my number 1 has been mentioned before.
What?
It is Boone Lake.
Okay, yeah.
My number 1, unlike Emily, who played Boone Lake and thought this is going to be my number 1, but it's my number 2, I felt the exact same way. There are not many games that I'll play the first time and go, like, basically love at first sight with a board game.
Yeah.
I played this game, and that's how I felt. Yeah. It just, and so much so, I can't even describe to you very well what it is about the game.
It's the whole experience together.
The whole thing, to me, it feels like, and I've played most of Pfister's games, the big ones. To me, this feels like a perfect version of a lot of the same things he makes you feel in other games. And it's so streamlined. And it just, you felt all the turns were incredibly satisfying. What you're doing on your turn, the tableaus that you're building, the engines that you're building, all the various things that you're doing. It gives you a lot of different things to do. There's levers that you can put on your board, and just the tactile feel of like flipping those levers up and down to get those abilities, building those levers in the first place. And that's just one little aspect of the game. Boone Lake, without question, I knew it when I played it. I thought this is going to be really high on my list, and it ended up being my
also
number 1.
Talk about a game that's right for expansions.
We
too.
absolutely have to get you to
game.
play
I
it.
just haven't played
Oh,
it.
definitely.
It is.
You're going to like it,
It's
Jeremy.
really
Love
good.
it.
I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah.
So this game like made a shift in everything I was doing in the year. Like, so if you watch my solo list, Solomon Kane was going to be like my number 1 game of the year, and this game just like pushed it right on out of there.
Wow.
And it's one of my favorite games of all time. Like, we're talking Mage Knight, Gloomhaven, Too Many Bones, Kingdom Death Monster, and somewhere in there's got to be a shakeup, because Ark Nova is like, I can't really find anything wrong with the game other than people will have their preferences of how this game should feel to them. Like like you said, slow. Well, it might build too slow for some people. They would like the board to be reorganized a little bit better. Fine, or they would like the iconography to be a little bit more clear. Oh, okay, fine. But like, there's nothing wrong with the game. Like I when I play it, I'm like, there's everything I want. Like, I get to make interesting decisions with these cards, and I know I'm not going to get them back. That's the hardest thing. It's like you're watching the strategy play out, and you're like, this is not working. But then this card is really enticing, and then I can snap and get that card. What am I going to do? And then I know I have to discard because I don't have the five card thing yet. So I'm going to be down to 3 cards. What is this card going to be? And I mean, it just feels good to think that out. Like I find that so pleasing. And I love card games. Like I love, at the end of it all, I love card games. I love card games that build tableaus. I like, just engine building. I like trick taking, like that kind of stuff. So I just like slick card games, and this is not so slick. It's still Euro-ish, but it just feels that way. And it just keeps me engaged. I played this game almost, I would say, somewhere in the 20s.
That's
times.
crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. For me to take that amount of time to play a game, if you've been
Yeah,
following me on my personal account, I play it constantly in the morning. Like I get up in the morning and I
Is
just
that
play.
your coffee game?
Yeah, it's my
That
coffee.
is not what I think of as a coffee game.
Well, I drink 3 cups of coffee. So, yeah.
You might need to play our Nova in the morning.
Yeah, I drink a couple cups of coffee in the morning. So, yeah, I just find that system of like how you do the cards. I've thought it was going to be one way all the time. Like, oh, you just do it this way. Get your association action at 5 and do. No, there's just so many different ways to play this game, and I'm not even good at it. I mean, I'm not even good at it. I just know that like this will be a game that I hope is like an evergreen that keeps giving more. Because I hope you're right. Like I hope what you're saying is right, and this game is that good to the point where people like the publisher will invest so much more in making that game expand, because this is one of my favorite games ever. This is one of my favorite games.
I think this is going to be one of those games that's just going to be hard for people to get pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because as soon as the inventory's out there, they're going to
sell
I
out.
really think this thing's going to sell out.
Pre-order
Then
it.
people are going to be waiting. Yes. Get up there and pre-order. Don't mess around, because this thing is going to come into your stores for a split second maybe and then disappear.
Don't worry if you don't like it. Somebody will take it off your hands.
Right.
Don't worry if you go like, man, vs. Meeple was like pumping this up and I hated it. And like, put it up for sale and see how long it lasts.
Right, that's the closest thing to a guarantee we'll ever make. But I guarantee that will have a
You're
resale.
like, it didn't connect with me. PM cent. And you'll be like, well, I should probably keep it because everybody likes it so much. No, I feel like that's going to happen. And it happened with Terraforming Mars. I remember Terraforming Mars when I was even interested in it for the first time, which totally backfired for me. But it was out of stock. You couldn't keep it in stock. So I remember that because I was going to my flagship store all the time trying to get a copy. She was like, no, they're out of stock, and we're going to get maybe 1 or 2. I think this game is going to be just like that.
Yeah. It's going to be one of those games. It's since Terraforming Mars, I think it's going to have that level of impact on the hobby for sure. So that's all of our top 10s.
That's a good list. I think didn't disagree.
No.
With any of them, except for maybe one that I didn't personally love.
And it wasn't technically 40 games because of the overlap, but we went over 40 games at least 40 times. And,
Yeah, we definitely did.
but if you have some input on our list, if you think we're crazy, if you think Arc Nova is not good, which you're probably crazy if
You're
you do.
wrong.
Picking a fight there.
There's people out there that don't like it.
Tell us what your top 10 lists are below. Tell
Yeah.
us what you thought of our top 10 lists below. Yeah. I think the good news is my big takeaway from 2021 is I thought it was another great year.
It's a strong
for
year.
games.
Yeah.
Like
good
we
games.
were talking about this a little bit. You thought there was no one massive
Well,
game.
for
but
me, there wasn't. Like in some years, there's been like the game, and I love Arc Nova. I don't know. We'll see.
This is the
We'll see what
first year
happens.
for me personally where I had to cut some off my top 10 that I was like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, I had 14 or 15 titles.
So I would
So,
say
yeah.
for me, I had 2 of my favorite games of all time come to me. So I think this is a great year.
That's crazy.
And
Well,
one
that's-
that defines a genre, like 2 that kind of defines genres for me. So it's like Anka's now my area control game to topple. Like Mind Management is my first hidden movement game. So now
Well,
that's
you
the
struck
game.
gold with
Like,
it.
Yeah,
So then
it's a good one.
and then Solomon Kane hit me so much for the theme that it has. And someone who doesn't know these novels and all that stuff like that, it hit me so much that like that's now in there. And then and then Arc Nova came out of absolutely nowhere. Although I did know about it, it was just that after I asked the publisher about it, he got me like too hype about it. And he was like, "Oh, how do you even know about this game?" And then I was like, "Well, I do a little research." He was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna tell you about it." And then he got me excited about it, and it just paid off. Like I could not believe how much that game had taken me over. So here we are with those 4 titles that worked out so well for me, and that makes a very good year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let us know what you think about our lists. Share your list below. And until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table no matter what game you're playing. Yeah. And we'll see you then. Yeah.
We're sponsored by Fun Again Games, where everyone is welcome at our table. And your source for hard-to-find imports, liquidation games, new releases, and much more. Be sure to visit funagain.com to check it out.